"Did you shoot these two women?" And I literally said, "They were shot." That was the moment at which it all just kind of caved in. My world was gone. It felt like suspended reality. It just wasn't real.
You ruined my life. I hope you never find happiness. Bye, Mark. These texts arrived on Mark Gerardot's phone at 7 p.m. on April 23, 2018. By the time he read them, his wife of 24 years had already shot his mistress and turned the gun on herself. But this wasn't a crime of passion. It was the culmination of 3 months of surveillance so thorough that Jennair had documented every word of her husband's betrayal in 12 handwritten notebooks. November 2017. Mark Gerardot accepted a marketing position at the University of Delaware in Newark. His new boss was Meredith Chapman, a 33-year-old communications executive who had built an impressive career trajectory, from Republican state Senate candidate to university administrator. Their professional chemistry was immediate. Mark admired Meredith's ambition and energy. She saw potential in him that matched her own drive. Within weeks, their working relationship shifted. Late meetings became personal conversations. Professional admiration became emotional intimacy. By December, text messages between them had crossed professional boundaries. Mark told Meredith about tensions in his marriage. She confided about her recent divorce from Wilmington City Councilman Luke Chapman. Jennair Gerardot remained in South Carolina, managing the lease on their home while Mark settled into Delaware. The physical distance gave the affair space to develop. Mark's texts to Meredith grew from dozens to hundreds per day. Snapchat messages disappeared after viewing, creating an illusion of privacy. He believed his digital tracks were covered. The affair intensified through the holidays. Mark split his time between Delaware and South Carolina, maintaining 2 separate narratives. To Jennair, he was stressed from the new job and long commute. To Meredith, he was trapped in a dying marriage, planning his escape. Neither woman knew the full truth of what he was telling the other. December 2017. Jennair moved to Delaware to reunite with her husband. Almost immediately, she sensed something wrong. Mark was distant, protective of his phone, defensive about his schedule. 24 years of marriage had taught her his patterns. These weren't normal work stresses. Her suspicions crystallized around Valentine's Day 2018. Mark's behavior had become increasingly erratic. Sudden schedule changes, unexplained absences, a new attention to his appearance. Jennair made a decision that would set everything in motion. She hired a technology specialist to unlock Mark's phone. The specialist succeeded. Suddenly, Jennair had access to months of communications between Mark and Meredith. She read their Snapchat exchanges, their text messages, their plans for the future. The evidence was overwhelming and explicit. Her husband wasn't just having an emotional affair. The relationship with Meredith was fully physical and deeply romantic. Confronted with the evidence, Mark initially denied everything. Then, faced with his own words on screen, he admitted the affair. The couple agreed to try counseling. They scheduled sessions for late February. Mark promised to end things with Meredith. Jennair wanted to believe him, but trust, once broken, demanded verification. Meredith Chapman represented everything she'd worked to become: successful, independent, professionally accomplished. After her political run for Delaware State Senate in 2016, she'd pivoted to higher education administration. She'd recently finalized her divorce and moved to a new home on Lowry's Lane in Bryn Mawr, part of Philadelphia's affluent Main Line. In April 2018, she would begin a new position as assistant vice president at Villanova University, just blocks from her new home. At 33, she was rebuilding her life on her own terms. Her social media showed a confident professional, celebrating new beginnings. She posted photos at Villanova, expressing excitement about the future. What Meredith didn't know was that Jennair had been tracking her every movement. GPS devices attached to her car reported her location in real time. Jennair had labeled Meredith's tracker "whore" in the monitoring software. Every commute, every errand, every meeting with Mark was documented and analyzed. Friends would later describe Meredith as energetic and kind. She was unaware of the surveillance network surrounding her. She didn't know about the binoculars trained on her home, the tracker on her vehicle, or the recordings of her conversations with Mark. She believed she was starting fresh, free from her past marriage, building something new with Mark. She had no idea she had become the target of an elaborate revenge plot. Jennair's surveillance operation began with digital infiltration but quickly expanded into physical monitoring. She opened secret credit cards to fund her activities, keeping the expenses hidden from joint accounts. The purchases painted a disturbing picture of escalating obsession. First came the GPS trackers, sophisticated devices that could monitor location in real time. She attached one to Mark's car, labeling it "lying jerk" in the tracking software. Another went on Meredith's vehicle. The trackers gave Jennair omniscient knowledge of their movements, allowing her to verify or disprove every claim Mark made about his whereabouts. Next, she acquired audio recording devices. These weren't simple voice recorders but sophisticated bugs that could be sewn into clothing. She carefully stitched them into the lining of Mark's jackets, his suit pockets, his laptop bag. Every conversation he had, whether with Meredith or about Meredith, was captured and stored. The scope expanded further. She purchased lock-picking tools, though she never used them. She bought computer hacking software to maintain access to Mark's communications. She even acquired a DNA testing kit to analyze hair she found in Mark's car, seeking physical proof of Meredith's presence. The financial trail showed methodical preparation: shooting range memberships, ammunition purchases, a Taurus handgun bought 5 weeks before the murders, binoculars for surveillance, latex gloves that would leave no fingerprints. Each purchase represented an escalation, a step closer to action. February and March 2018 became a period of surreal duality. Mark and Jennair attended marriage counseling sessions, discussing communication and trust. During their second session, Mark discovered a recording device sewn into his jacket. He confronted Jennair, who agreed to stop the surveillance. She didn't stop. Instead, she became more sophisticated in her methods. While telling their counselor about hopes for reconciliation, she was secretly transcribing hours of recorded conversations into notebooks. While Mark believed the surveillance had ended, she was actually expanding it, capturing every word, every meeting, every lie. The notebooks revealed the depth of her operation. 12 volumes filled with transcribed conversations, timestamps, and analysis. She documented patterns in Mark's deceptions, catching him in lies about his whereabouts, his communications, his intentions. The recordings captured him telling Meredith he loved her, while simultaneously promising Jennair he had ended the affair. Jennair also maintained contact with a divorce coach, Sheila Brennan. In these sessions, she discussed practical matters: property division, financial planning, life after divorce. Brennan would later report that Jennair spoke about the future, making plans that suggested she intended to move forward. But these sessions were another performance. While discussing new beginnings with her coach, Jennair was visiting shooting ranges and researching murder-suicide cases, specifically referencing the Phil Hartman case in her final letter. March 2018. Jennair began visiting shooting ranges in Delaware. The first visit was exploratory, learning basic handling, understanding the weapon. The second visit showed improved accuracy. By the third visit, on April 23rd, the day of the murders, she was confident with the weapon. The gun purchase itself occurred in mid-March, about 5 weeks before the killings. She bought a Taurus Spectrum, a compact handgun designed for concealed carry. She paid cash, leaving minimal paper trail. Ammunition purchases followed, enough for practice and the final act. 2 weeks before the murders, Jennair rented a black Cadillac XTS. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but part of the plan. Her own vehicle was known to Mark and potentially to Meredith. The rental provided anonymity, a way to surveil and travel without detection. She studied Meredith's new neighborhood in Bryn Mawr, learning the layout of streets, the rhythm of the area, the best approaches to the house. She knew Meredith had recently moved there, was still settling in, might not have full security measures in place. The main line's quiet streets and large properties provided privacy that would delay discovery. On April 20th, 3 days before the murders, Jennair wrote her suicide letter. She described herself as irretrievably broken and expressed her determination for revenge. The letter showed awareness that her actions were wrong, but insisted she had no other choice. She had crossed a psychological line from planning to commitment. April 23, 2018. Jennair suggested she and Mark have dinner that evening to discuss divorce logistics. Mark agreed, perhaps relieved that she seemed ready to move forward. He didn't know she had visited the shooting range that morning, making her final preparations. At 2:40 p.m., a gas station receipt placed Jennair in Radnor Township, hours before the planned dinner. She had driven the rental Cadillac to Meredith's neighborhood and positioned herself for surveillance. She watched. She waited. She knew Meredith's schedule, knew when she would return home from work. The dinner with Mark proceeded normally at first. They discussed practical matters, who would get what, how to divide assets, next steps. But Jennair was watching the clock. She knew Meredith would be home soon. She excused herself from dinner, telling Mark she would be late. At 7 p.m., the texts began arriving on Mark's phone. "You ruined my life." Then, "I hope you never find happiness." Finally, "Bye, Mark." Mark tried calling Jennair. No answer. He tried Meredith. No answer. Growing increasingly worried, he made a decision that would lead him to a scene of horror. Jennair had entered Meredith's home and hidden herself. When Meredith walked through her door after work, Jennair was waiting. A neighbor would later report hearing a single gunshot around 7 p.m. Jennair shot Meredith once, a fatal wound. Then she turned the gun on herself, falling beside her victim on the kitchen floor. Mark Gerardot arrived at Meredith's Bryn Mawr home to find both women dead. His 911 call was barely coherent. First responders arrived expecting to transport wounded victims. Instead, they found a crime scene that would take days to fully process. Police Superintendent William Colarulo emphasized to media that this wasn't a love triangle in any conventional sense. There was no confrontation between rivals, no fight over a man. This was what Colarulo called a calculated, planned attack by one woman against another who never saw it coming. The investigation revealed the months of preparation. The rental car was traced to Jennair. The GPS trackers were recovered from both vehicles. Police found the binoculars, ammunition, latex gloves, and earplugs Jennair had brought with her. They discovered the extensive surveillance records, the notebooks, the recordings, the financial trail of secret credit cards. The evidence painted a picture of methodical planning that contradicted any narrative of spontaneous violence. This wasn't a woman who snapped. This was someone who had spent months building toward this moment, each step deliberate, each purchase purposeful. The case challenges common assumptions about intimate partner violence. Statistically, women commit only about 10% of homicide-suicides, and those usually involve mothers killing children, not wives killing husbands' lovers. Jennair's case stands as an outlier, a reminder that domestic violence doesn't follow neat patterns. Mark Gerardot would later speak to media about discovering the extent of his wife's surveillance. He found recordings he never knew existed, trackers he never suspected, a network of monitoring that had captured his every move. He expressed remorse for the affair, acknowledged he could have handled things differently, but nothing in his behavior had indicated knowledge of Jennair's plans. The Radnor Township community struggled to process what had happened in their quiet neighborhood. 2 successful women were dead. A 24-year marriage had ended in murder. The tools of surveillance, GPS trackers anyone could buy online, recording devices available at any electronic store, had been weaponized in service of revenge. The investigation closed with both perpetrator and victim dead. No trial would examine the evidence in court. No verdict would assign legal culpability. Instead, the case stands as a warning about how technology can enable obsession, how surveillance can feed rather than satisfy suspicion, how the period between discovering betrayal and deciding to leave can become the most dangerous time in any relationship. Meredith Chapman was buried in Newark, Delaware. Her family remembered her as ambitious and talented, someone whose life was cut short just as she was beginning a new chapter. Jennair Gerardot's family grieved privately, struggling to reconcile the woman they knew with her final actions. The house on Lowry's Lane was eventually sold. The University of Delaware and Villanova University issued brief statements. Life continued in Radnor Township and Wilmington. But for those who knew the 3 people at the center of this tragedy, questions remain. How did a professional relationship become an affair that triggered such elaborate surveillance? How did surveillance designed to confirm suspicions instead fuel an escalating obsession? How did a woman who spent decades building a life with her husband decide that destroying everything was her only option? The physical evidence tells us what happened. The recordings and notebooks document the progression. The GPS data maps the movements. But the why, the transformation of betrayal into methodical revenge, remains locked in those final moments in a kitchen in Bryn Mawr, where 2 women's lives ended and a 3rd person's life was destroyed forever.